if you want to switch careers to being a data analyst, then this video will give you a step-by-step guide on how to become a data analyst. Now, I've been getting quite a few messages, whether it's on email or on the YouTube comment section, about people who are already in a job and they're asking, how do I become a data analyst while I've already got a full-time job or I've got family commitments? What sort of the steps do I need to go through, and how long should they generally take for me to become a data analyst? Now, if you were just training to be a data analyst and you were like a student or you're training to become one, then normally I would say, look, 6 to 12 months, it should be enough time for you to pick up all the skills and to be a data analyst. But if you're actually working, or you've got working commitments, or you've got family commitments, then it might take slightly longer. So in this video, I'm just going to go through sort of the steps that you need in order to become a data analyst. Now, I'm not going to talk about data scientists because I think I'll make a different video about that, because it takes a few more steps and you need to know a bit more to become a data scientist. But I'll stick to data analyst, and hopefully from that, like I said, I'll make another video, but you can also progress from a data analyst to being a data scientist later in your career, if that's the route you wish to take. First thing to do when you want to be a data analyst is to learn a tool that you can use to analyze data. Now, typically, most data analysts will use SQL because you're typically working with structured data within databases. So you should really try and learn SQL. If you work in an organization where they have SQL, that's great, because you can get access to SQL if you're allowed to, and you can then learn how to use that. Now, if you don't have access to it, then you can download free versions of SQL. So Microsoft SQL Server Express, and also sort of MySQL from Oracle. They're sort of free versions of SQL. What you won't have is the data, and I'll talk about that later in terms of getting the data. But the first thing you need to do is learn how to use a tool, because if you're not good at how to use a tool, then you find being a data analyst is really hard, because it is about analyzing data with a particular tool. If you can get access to SQL within or SQL within your company, that's great. If you can't, download it and then try and do a few courses on SQL. Now, Udemy, Coursera, they're usually quite good, but what you really want to do is do the really basic stuff, okay? So you want to be able to use SQL to connect to a database and be able to run simple queries. And they're things like selecting certain columns, selecting certain rows, applying certain filters, where statements, if statements, joins, that kind of stuff. Very basic stuff that you need. And here, like I said, you want to learn the basics. You're not aiming to be an expert, okay? Now, if you're very proficient at it, you find it really easy, then yeah, go ahead and learn some more stuff. But what I find is that when people are moving over to being a data analyst, okay, they try and be experts. You don't have to be an expert. A lot of what you will learn about being a data analyst is when you are a data analyst. In order to train up to do a data analytics job, okay, you need to know the fundamentals, the basics of a tool that you're using. So, like I said, if you have access to SQL and you can use it, that's great. Like I said, download it if you can't, and then do some courses on it. Now, how long should you spend? Now, most people think that they need to go on some really big course to learn SQL. Don't, okay? That's the worst thing you can do, because what will happen is that you will learn stuff in a very theoretical manner, and it won't really help you when you're applying for a job. What you want to do is look for really short courses, and I mean nothing more than like 2 hours. If it's more than 2 hours, the course is too long, okay? You want to look for very short courses that tackle a particular problem. So, for example, doing joins. If you could find a Coursera course on how to do joins that's contained in 2 hours, that's brilliant, because you will then be able to become really good at what a join is. Then you do select statements, filtering, where statements, if statements, all those kind of things that are quite basic things in order to extract data from an SQL table. Once you've found courses and stuff, like I said, no longer than 2 hours, you should be doing a few of them, let's say one a week, okay, for about, I don't know, well, let's say 10 of them. You want to do at least 10 of them, because there's about 10 different basic functions that you want to learn. If you can do more, great, do more. But don't do too many, okay? If you're going beyond like 4 months of doing courses, like one course a week or 2 courses a week, more than 4 months, you're probably doing too much. You'll find that if you do 1 course a week over 4 months, that's more than enough. You learn the basics of how SQL works, okay? What you won't really have is the practical element of it. What you won't have is how do I apply SQL onto the real data sets, okay? So in the courses, you might have seen them using data. You might even get access to some dummy data, but what you won't have is real world data and real world problems that you can solve. So this is where you need to try and get access to some real world data, because what you're trying to do is answer some real world questions. The next thing I would do is I would look for data sets that are publicly available, okay? And these are usually public data sets, whether it's from your Office of Statistics. In most countries, you will have a National Statistics Office. You'll find they've got a lot of data on health, housing, employment, things like COVID. You'll find lots of data on that, okay? And then think about real world questions that you might ask. So for example, you might ask a question around, has employment in my area or in my city or in my country gone, improved, okay? So which means has it gone up? So you get data sets that spans years, and what you want to do is you want to upload that into SQL. Now, that stage is probably a bit too advanced for someone who's beginning. So ideally, you really want a SQL table. Now, Microsoft offer they have on their they have a website where you can actually get actual backup of SQL tables that you can just import into Microsoft SQL Express, and you can analyze that data. But what I find is that because that's a particular data set, it may not apply to you, which is why I always say try and get a generic data set or a public data set, because then you can have sort of questions about that data set that are real questions, okay? Now, in order to import data into SQL, it is not that difficult, okay? Especially as a single table. You don't want multiple tables and you want to join tables. You just want a singular table. So you might be able to download a really big table from the National Statistics Office and upload it into SQL. Now, it is, if you need a tutorial, just Google it just go on YouTube and look for tutorials on how to upload videos. Go on YouTube to look at how to upload tables into SQL, and you'll find it's not that complicated, okay? It's just an import function, and then you've just got to define the data types, and then you have like a single table within SQL that you can query. And the reason I prefer that over something that someone like Microsoft might offer is that their data sets are particular to a particular industry or sector, whereas a public data set is something that you would have an opinion about. So you might say, like I said, has employment improved in my area? Has health and housing, or is there a relationship between health and housing? And you better run queries on those data. So that's why I suggest a sort of public data set where you would have some questions that you could ask of the data. Like I said, if you can't import, try and get a friend to help you import that data into SQL. The best case scenario is obviously if your business gives you access to the business data, because you work in that business, you will understand what challenges the business has, what kind of questions they have, and you can practice on that data set. But that's really uncommon. If you're not working in the data teams or the data space, it's very unlikely they'll give you access to that data. So that's not usually a viable option for most people. Like I said, you can go for publicly available SQL data sets that you'll find like some Microsoft will give on their website, or you can just use public data sets that you can import into SQL. So that's the next step. What you really want to do is learn what you've apply what you've learned. Okay, so you've done all these courses for about 4 months. You've learned the basics of joining things, running select, if, where statements, manipulating data. That's the kind of stuff that you want to be able to practice on some kind of real data set with real questions that you may have. Once you've done that, what you will have is sort of a skill set where you can actually put on your CV, I know how to use SQL, okay, because you've actually applied it and you've learned about it, okay. Now, if these Coursera or Udemy courses give certificates, that's great, but don't aim for the certificate. It's not the certificate that you're interested in. When you're already in employment, it's very hard to work for certification. What you want to do is you want to do courses that help you learn practical skills and how to use SQL. Now, the other thing that you might want to do in parallel to learning SQL is to learn R or Python, okay. Now, it's not necessary as a data analyst to learn that, but what you find is actually if you're learning R or Python, okay, is that you see a lot of similarities between the languages, okay. So in your CV, after 4 months or 6 months of using both R and Python or learning about them, you can put, you've used SQL, you've used it on dataset. You can then try and replicate what you did in SQL in R or Python, okay. Choose one, you don't have to do both. And then you can actually put that in your CV that you have some understanding or some use of R or Python. And that really is good for a manager because they show that you're versatile with tools. You're not just going to come in and say, I can only use SQL to do anything. They know that if they need a progression of some someone to progress into a future role, they know that you know how to use other tools. So the idea is that if you know SQL and you know one other tool, then hiring managers can look at that and go, oh, actually, they're not just a tool specific, they have the ability to learn other tools. So if you can also learn R or Python alongside SQL across the 4 to 6 months max. Okay, like I said, you don't want to be becoming an expert at it. You become an expert when you're in the job. To get the job, okay, what you want to show is proficiency, that you're able to do the foundations, the basics, so that on day one you can run queries. Okay, that you're not being taught how to run queries, you can run queries on day one. Okay, so that's sort of the first step, because what you're trying to do is get on your CV that you know how to do analysis using either SQL and or Python. The next thing that you want to do is learn Excel. Okay, so it's another tool, and you're probably wondering, oh my god, I've got another tool. Now, a lot of people, if you're in a job where you use Excel, you find it's very easy. Okay, but if you're not, okay, then you should learn how to use Excel. Now, you can get access to Excel, a free trial version, from Microsoft. I think it's about 30-day free trial. Or if you, like I said, if you're in a job and you've got access to Excel, use that. If you haven't, if worst case scenario, you can actually use Google Sheets. So get a Gmail account and then go to Google Sheets, okay, and you'll find that you have access to it. A lot of the functionality is very similar. And again, learn Excel. I would say do about 4 or 5 courses on the basics of Excel. Okay, all you want to do is run some basic queries in Excel. You want to be able to sum stuff up. You want to be able to average stuff. You want to be able to manipulate data. You want to run subtotals, totals. Ideally, if you can do pivot and VLOOKUPs, that would be great. And it is actually a minimum to know that kind of stuff. But what I wouldn't really obsess about that. I'd want you to get familiar with Excel. Okay. Now, while you're learning Excel, I would also advise you to take some basic courses in statistics. Now, again, you can go on Coursera, Udemy. You can even do YouTube videos on statistics, and I found really good ones. But the thing I find is that when you want to learn statistics, you actually need it to be taught to you. You need to actually go in a class. So if you can afford it in terms of money and in terms of time, then try and go on a course. Now, it doesn't have to be a long course. You're not doing a degree in statistics or even an A-level in statistics. You just want a very short course. So ideally a weekend course where you do like over Saturday or Sunday, or you do it over a month where it's a couple of evenings a month, or one evening a month, one evening a week, over a month or two, where basically you're getting an introduction to statistics. Okay, if they go way beyond things like clustering and they start talking about I guess decision trees or multiple regression, that's probably too much. What you want to learn are things like the descriptive statistics. Okay, you want to know the basics of descriptive statistics. Mean, median, max, average, any kind of mean. Sorry, like I've said that as well. Ranges, standard deviations, all that kind of stuff, because they're the stuff that you can apply in Excel, okay? And they're also the kind of stuff that you can also apply in SQL. So while you're learning Excel, learn statistics, then you can then apply it into Excel as you're learning those statistics. Now, it would be great to learn basic regression, so like linear regression, that would be really good, as well as sort of clustering, because they're all things you can actually run in Excel. So there's some basic statistics that you can also run in Excel that would be great to learn, but don't worry too much about that. You just want to know the basic. Most of what data analysts do are what I call descriptive statistics. Okay, they describe the data, they summarize them up in a way that they describe them. Okay, and also learn about how you would visually represent that data. So a lot of basic statistics courses will tell you things about creating bar charts, pie charts, box and whisker plots, linear line charts, histograms, that kind of stuff. So you want to learn about that kind of how to represent sort of descriptive statistics, because like I said, most of what you would do as a data analyst is that kind of analysis. It's very much descriptive. Okay, when you get into the more predictive stuff, yes, data analysts do predictive stuff, but it is more for sort of data scientists, which I'll talk about, like I said, in another video. So like I said, for first 4 months you want to learn SQL, you want to be able to apply it to some real data. If you can learn R or Python, that's great, and then you want to move on to using Excel, and you want to do a course in statistics, ideally a talk course over 4 weeks, a month, or a weekend. Make it a very short course. You're not trying to be an expert, but if you can't afford, or whatever reason, time, money, to do a course, then you can learn a lot through online courses. Okay, but again, don't go too advanced. You're not, like I said, most of the advanced stuff that you will learn in the job. You want the basic stuff so that someone doesn't have to hold your hand when you start the job. Okay, so now you've got the tool sort of section sort of. If you know SQL, you know Excel, you know basic statistics, that's it. You've got a great chunk, or you've learned a great chunk or good chunk of what it is to be a data analyst. And that would look really good on your CV, because you can say things like, I know how to use SQL, I also know how to use R or Python, I also know I'm very proficient at Excel, I can do these kind of things, VLOOKUPs, pivot, subtotals, SUMIFs, all that kind of stuff. I've also done a basic course in statistics, so I know a bit of statistics. That's great. The next thing, which really is really hard to teach, okay, and it's something that you have to develop, is how to solve business questions with data. Okay, because that's what a data analyst does. A data analyst gets the business question, and they try and solve it with data. And a lot of those business questions are grounded in I want to know something. Okay, so what you want to do is when you're around your business, try and work out what is that your business wants to know. What would be useful for the business to know with data? Because what you're trying to do is get your brain to think in a way about what is it that people want to know, and how would I go about answering it with data. Like I said, it's not something that you can teach people, but there are courses on problem solving and logical thinking. And again, I wouldn't go on a course on this. I'd probably, like, if you want to do a Coursera or Udemy, that's fine. You could just watch YouTube videos and they'll tell you sort of the process, how you want to go. But what you're doing is essentially you're going, okay, the business will have, all businesses have some kind of challenge, okay? And even if they're successful, they want to be more successful. So what their challenges might be, where do we find more opportunity? Businesses that are struggling, their challenge will be, how do we, to turn it around and become successful again, okay? So they'll all have these challenges. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to say, right, okay, if these were the challenges that the business had, how can I use data to answer those challenges? And you should be thinking like that, because as you start thinking like that, you then put yourself in a frame of mind that when you do go for an interview as a data analyst, and they pose a problem, a question to you, you can answer that with data. You can answer that in your head. You'd be thinking, right, okay, you would say, if I had access to this data, then I would do this. And ideally, you should know what data a business has. So if you work in like retail, you'd know that they've got transactional data, they've got a product database, they've probably got inventory database, they've got an employee database, and if they've got a loyalty card, they have a loyalty database. If it's an e-commerce, they'll have a website, they'll have web data, behavioral data, they'll have account data potentially, because people have to do an account in order to order things from the web. So you should really know what data people have. And that's another thing, again, you can't really teach people that. It's something that you have to learn on your own. So again, while you're learning Excel and statistics, think about what data businesses have and how you could use that data to answer business questions. Once you've learned all that, and again, you should have wrapped all that up within 12 months, okay? So from the moment you decide that you want to do this, you should wrap it all up in 12 months. And if you, like I said, if you're already in a job, you're not trying to be an expert data analyst. You're just getting enough so that you can switch careers into being a data analyst, okay? So because don't forget, you've already got work experience, okay? Maybe it's not in a related field, but you have work experience, okay? And then you're trying to switch careers, and that's your motivation for learning all these things that you can then explain to the recruiter or the recruiting manager. Now you've got all of those, what's next, okay? So now what you need to do is try and get some relevant work experience. Now, ideally, if you can approach if your company has a data team and data analytics team, and you can approach them and you can say to them, look, I'm really interested in getting into this field. I'd really appreciate an opportunity to work on a project, even if it's a project in parallel. So they're doing the real work, you just get access to a similar data, and you are answering the question in your own way. Now, if your company can do that for you, that's great, okay? But not all companies will have the luxury of time or resources to do that. So what you want to do is try and find a situation where you can apply your data analytics skill, your newly learned data analytics skills, to another area, okay? Now, here, what you want to do is try and find either friends who've got businesses who can give you data, or even like go to a charity or to an organization where they could benefit from some kind of data analysis, okay? Because what that does is if you can analyze real data and real world problems. So let's say you went to a charity and said, look, if you give me access to your donor database, I can do a segmentation for you, okay? I can tell you who your high value donors are, who your low value donors are, and sort of how they're migrating over time, that will be useful for the charity, and also it'll be useful for you because you'll get practical work experience, which you can then put into your CV as a portfolio. If you can't get real world data, and I appreciate a lot of people won't be able to get access to that, then you want to still build a portfolio of data analysis. And here, like I said, if you want to use public data sets, use them and then try and get some topical question that you might want to answer. So, like for example, recently now, obviously we've got COVID, you might want to get access to your local COVID or even international COVID data sets, and you may want to just create some stuff, okay? Create some analysis, and then be able to say in an interview, look, I've been analyzing this data and this is what I found. Now, the best way to demonstrate what you found is to visualize that data. Now, you can easily visualize that data in Excel. Excel has a great ability to create charts and graphs, so you can do it in Excel. But if you can do it in something like Tableau or Power BI, again, you can get a trial version of that. And then once you've built that, you just take a screen grab and put it, in your CV or just have it separately that you can show a hiring manager, look, this is the kind of outputs that I can do, the kind of visualizations that I can do. So it's a good way to not only learn how to use tools like Tableau, Power BI, or even Excel to do visualizations of data, but it's also a good experience for you to take what is tabular data and put it into a visual form so that it explains the data better. And what it will help you do is try and work out, is this clear, right? Okay, so I've just analyzed this data and I've put it in a line chart. I'm showing COVID cases over time. Okay, is it clear? I've done it by day. Maybe by day over 2 years is too many data points. Maybe I'll do it by week. Actually weeks fluctuate. Do I do a rolling week? Rolling average, sorry. So it helps you understand how you should best present that data. And again, there are quite a few courses out there that talk about data visualization. It's worth looking at some of them. Again, you don't want to be an expert. So 1 or 2, 3 maybe. Just see how other people are visualizing or the advice they give in terms of visualizing data. But what you'll find is that you will have your own style of visualizing data, okay? And try and use that because you may find that other people do it in a certain way, but it may not work for you. So listen to what other people say, but then come up with your own style of data visualization. Okay, so if you've gone through all of those steps, okay, then what you should come to a position is you've got a tool, okay? You know how to use Python or R or definitely SQL. You know how to use Excel. You've built yourself a small portfolio either from real world data or from some public data set. And then you're ready to interview for a data analytics job. Now, ideally, you would want to apply internally to your company because your company knows you and they may offer you a role, or when a role comes up, they may allow you to interview for it. But if that's not going to be possible, then what I wouldn't recommend is you just shoot your CV off to lots of different people. The first thing I would suggest you do is reach out to recruiting managers, okay, or hiring managers. So what you want to do is you want to reach out to people who manage analytics team, and you just want to say to them, look, I work in this field and I want to move over to data analytics. I'd really appreciate if any opportunity came up that you would consider me for for these roles. And then here's my CV. Give them a nice little cover letter, or even in the CV, give them a paragraph explaining the types of things that you have done in the data analytics space. And obviously they'll appreciate that you worked somewhere else and you want to move over to data analytics, so you won't necessarily have the 100% relevant experience. Other thing that you might want to do is reach out to recruiters, okay? Now, I've found that especially when you're trying to get into this space, recruiters are really good. And also now, or actually for the last few years, data analytics is a very competitive space, okay? And the problem is that you have really good data analysts, and sometimes you don't have so much great data analysts. And so as a recruiting manager, so for example myself, I rely on recruiters to do that filtering. So what happens is if you go to a recruiter, they'll be able to advise you and say, look, you need to either brush up on these skills or learn something here because that's what this recruiting manager's looking for, or just pivot your CV slightly because this manager is actually more interested in R than SQL. So you can just say, look, I know how to use SQL, I know how to do all these functions, but I've got a solid grounding in SQL, so I can also use that. So they'll just advise you on how best to position yourself, and they'll typically hear about roles that may not even potentially be advertised because they're always in connection with hiring managers. So I know I always get approached by recruiters, even just checking in, see how things are, and then obviously asking if I've got any roles coming up in the future that they can help me with. And you know what, as a recruiting manager, sometimes it's just easy to go with recruiters. Like I said, they do the initial filtering. They also find candidates in this really competitive marketplace. That's really the step-by-step journey that I would advise someone who's already got a career and wants to switch to being a data analyst. That's what you should do. Like I said, don't spend more than 12 months learning all this stuff. You're not there to be an expert. After 12 months, if you've managed to go through all those steps that I've talked about, then you should be ready to apply for a job. Like I said, reach out directly to hiring managers or go via recruiters if you haven't got the opportunity internally. I wouldn't send your CV out there. It would not get through. Even in this competitive landscape, recruiting managers, if CVs go through, they rarely pay attention, because what happens is that when you connect with someone, you provide your story, and people still do hire. They work on the basis of hiring other people who would have a good cultural fit. So if you connect with people, then you've already made that connection, and if you are a good fit, then they're more likely to consider your CV than if you're not. And again, recruiters are really good also for this. So yeah, so that's really it. Really, if you want to transfer or move from one career and switch over to being a data analyst, that's the advice I would give you. There's probably things I've missed off. So if you have any thoughts, or if you've got any questions, please put them in the YouTube comment section below. Please obviously do like this video and do subscribe to my channel, because they want to know how much that customer will make for them in the future. Now, the thing about a customer lifetime value model, there isn't actually a single way or a right way to do it. There are multiple ways.